I don't talk about what happened to Ryan Castellano anymore. Not because I don't want to, but because after the 100th time telling the story to detectives, FBI agents, podcasters, and armchair investigators online, you realise that nobody really believes you. They nod, they take notes, they say they're going to look into it, but I can see it in their eyes. That little flicker of doubt, that moment where they're wondering if I had something to do with it. Or worse, if I'm just making the whole thing up for attention. But I'm not. I swear to God, I'm not. It was October of 2019. I was 24, working a dead-end job at a tech startup in Austin that pretended to be all innovative and exciting, but was really just 12 of us crammed into a converted warehouse, answering customer service emails for an app nobody used. Ryan was my roommate at the time. We'd met freshman year at UT Austin and just kind of stayed in each other's orbit after graduation. He was one of those guys who was effortlessly good at everything. Played guitar, could cook actual meals that weren't ramen, had this way of talking to people that made them feel like they were the most interesting person in the room. I was the opposite. Anxious, overthinking everything, the kind of person who rehearsed conversations in the shower. Ryan had been talking about this road trip for months. He'd gotten obsessed with this podcast about abandoned places in America, and there was this one episode about a defunct mining town called Ashford, tucked away in the mountains of northern New Mexico. The town had been abandoned in the 1950s after some kind of mining accident, and according to the podcast, the whole place was still standing. Empty houses, a church, even a schoolhouse with desks still inside. Ryan loved that kind of thing. He was always dragging me to estate sales and antique shops, talking about the stories behind old objects. We left on a Thursday morning in early October. Ryan's beat-up Honda Civic was packed with camping gear, bags of Doritos, energy drinks, and his expensive DSLR camera. The plan was simple: drive the 9 hours to northern New Mexico, camp near Ashford, explore the town the next day, then drive back Saturday night. I'd requested the Friday off work, which my manager approved with the kind of disinterested shrug that made it clear he didn't care if I showed up at all. The drive was typical Ryan and me. He controlled the music, cycling through indie bands I'd never heard of, and I navigated using my phone, which kept losing signal as we got further into New Mexico. We stopped at a gas station in Raton around 4 in the afternoon, and I remember Ryan buying this disposable camera from the register, one of those Kodak ones you'd see in the 90s. The clerk, this older woman with deep-set wrinkles and turquoise jewellery, asked where we were headed. When Ryan mentioned Ashford, her expression changed. Just slightly, it was this little tightening around her eyes, like she'd tasted something bitter. "You boys be careful up there," she said. And it wasn't the friendly, routine kind of warning. Her tone was serious, almost urgent. Ryan laughed it off. "Ghosts?" he asked, grinning at her. She didn't smile back. She just slid his change across the counter and said, "Just be careful." In the car, Ryan was energised by that interaction. "See, that's exactly the kind of local folklore that makes these places interesting. I bet there's all kinds of stories about Ashford." I remember feeling uneasy, but I didn't say anything. Looking back on it now, I wonder if some part of me already knew. If there's such a thing as intuition, some animal part of our brain that recognises danger before we consciously process it. But I pushed it down. I didn't want to be the anxious friend who ruined everything. We reached the turn-off for Ashford around 6:30. The sun was already dipping behind the mountain, casting everything in this orange and purple light that would have been beautiful if I hadn't been focused on how rough the road was. It wasn't paved, just this rutted dirt track that wound up into dense pine forest. Ryan's Civic bounced and scraped over rocks, and I kept waiting for the exhaust system to just tear off. After about 45 minutes of climbing, the forest opened up and we saw it. Ashford. The town sat in this small valley, surrounded by mountains on all sides. There were maybe 30 buildings total, all made of weathered wood and stone that had gone grey with age. No power lines, no cars, no signs of human activity at all. Just these structures standing there in the failing light, like monuments to something that used to matter. Ryan pulled off onto a flat area near what looked like it had once been the main road through town. We got out, and I'll never forget how quiet it was. Not peaceful quiet. The kind of quiet that feels heavy, like the air itself is waiting for something. "This is incredible," Ryan said, already unslinging his camera. He started snapping photos, walking toward the nearest building, which looked like it might have been a general store at some point. The windows were broken out, and the door hung at an angle, one hinge rusted through. I stayed by the car, looking around. The buildings were in various states of decay. Some had collapsed roofs, others looked almost intact, just faded and worn. There was a church at the far end of the town, its steeple still standing, but leaning slightly to one side. Near us was a 2-story building that might have been a hotel or boarding house, and everywhere there were these little details that made it feel like people had just vanished. A rusted bicycle leaning against a wall, a pair of boots sitting on a porch, clothes still hanging on a line between 2 houses, now just tattered strips of fabric. "Ryan, we should set up camp before it gets dark," I called out. He waved me off. "Just a few more shots, the light is perfect right now." I helped him for the next 20 minutes, holding a reflector while he photographed building facades and detail shots of broken windows and peeling paint. By the time we decided to make camp, the sun had set completely and we were working by flashlight. We set up our tent in a clearing about 50 yards from the edge of the town, near a stand of pine trees. Ryan wanted to camp right in the middle of town, maybe inside one of the buildings, but I'd put my foot down on that one. Something about sleeping inside those empty structures felt wrong to me. We compromised on the clearing. Dinner was reheated cans of chili cooked on Ryan's camping stove, eaten straight from the can with plastic sporks. We sat by our small fire and Ryan was in his element, already planned tomorrow's exploration. He wanted to get inside the church, check out the schoolhouse, document everything. He was talking about maybe writing an article or starting a blog about abandoned America. I was only half listening. I kept looking back toward the town. In the firelight, I could just make out the silhouettes of the buildings against the slightly lighter sky, and I could swear I saw movement. Just small things. A flicker in one of the windows, a shadow crossing from one building to another. "Ryan, do you think anyone else knows about this place?" I asked, interrupting his monologue about compositional techniques for photographing decay. He shrugged. "Probably some locals, maybe other urban explorers. Why?" "I just keep feeling like we're not alone." Ryan looked where I was looking, then back at me with this amused expression. "Dude, you're psyching yourself out. We're literally in the middle of nowhere. The nearest town is like an hour away." He was right, logically, but I couldn't shake the feeling. We stayed up until around 11, then turned in. The tent was cramped with both of us and all our gear, but the sleeping bags were warm enough. I lay there in the darkness, listening to the wind in the trees and the small sounds of the forest. An owl somewhere in the distance, small animals rustling in the underbrush. Ryan fell asleep almost immediately. I could hear his breathing deepen and even out. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd hear something that would snap me back to alertness. A crack of a branch, a sound that might have been footsteps. At one point, I was sure I heard voices, distant and indistinct, but when I held my breath and really listened, there was nothing. Maybe I was just being paranoid. Maybe it was the strangeness of the place, the weight of all that abandonment. Or maybe, on some level, I already knew what was coming. I must have eventually drifted off because I woke suddenly to Ryan shaking my shoulder. I fumbled for my phone. It was 3:47 a.m. What's wrong?" I mumbled, disoriented. "Do you hear that?" Ryan whispered. I listened. At first I didn't hear anything except my own heartbeat loud in my ears. Then I caught it. Music. Faint. Tinny. Like it was coming from an old radio record player. It was some kind of big band music, the kind you'd hear in movies about the 1940s. Trumpets and clarinets, and a crooning vocalist. "Where is that coming from?" I asked, now fully awake. Ryan unzipped the tent slowly and we both peered out. The fire had died down to just glowing embers, but the moon was bright enough that we could see the town pretty clearly. The music was definitely coming from that direction. "Someone must be there," Ryan said, and I could hear the excitement in his voice. "Maybe it's other explorers, or maybe some locals hang out here. At 4 in the morning, playing big band music." Ryan was already pulling on his boots. "Come on, this is interesting. Let's check it out." Every instinct I had was screaming at me to stay in the tent, to tell Ryan this was a terrible idea, but I also didn't want to be alone, so I pulled on my shoes and grabbed my flashlight, even though I didn't turn it on yet. The moonlight was enough. We walked toward the town, and the music got gradually louder. It was coming from the church at the far end. As we got closer, I realized I could see light in the church windows. Not electric light, but the warm, flickering kind that comes from candles or lantern. Ryan grabbed my arm, his eyes wide. Someone's definitely in there. We approached the church slowly. It was a simple wooden structure with a small steeple and a set of double doors at the front. The doors were slightly ajar and light spilled out through the gap. The music was clear now. along with other sounds, voices, laughter, the clink of glasses. Ryan moved towards the doors, and I followed, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might crack a rib. He pushed one door open wider, slowly, and we looked inside. The church was full of people. I don't know how else to describe what we saw. There must have been 40 or 50 people inside, all dressed in old-fashioned clothing. The men wore suits and hats, the women wore dresses with the kind of cuts and styles you'd see in photos from the 1940s. They were dancing, talking, drinking from glass bottles. The music was coming from a phonograph set up near the altar. Candles were everywhere, on the pews, in wall sconces, creating this warm glow. And here's the thing that made my stomach drop. None of them noticed us. We were standing right in the doorway, and not a single person looked our way. They just kept dancing, kept talking, kept laughing. Ryan pulled out his phone, I assumed to take a video, but the screen was black. He pressed the power button. Nothing. "Battery's dead," he whispered, but it was at 70%. My phone was in my pocket. I pulled it out. Also dead. One of the men near us, a tall guy in a grey suit and fedora, turned suddenly and walked right toward us. I froze, but he didn't even glance at us. He walked through the doorway, passing so close to me that I could smell his cologne, something old-fashioned and woody, and then he kept walking, out into the night, toward one of the other buildings. Ryan grabbed my shoulder. "Did you see that? Did you fucking see that?" I nodded, unable to form words. We watched for maybe another minute. The party continued, completely oblivious to us. Then Ryan did something that I'll replay in my mind forever. He stepped inside the church. "Ryan, what are you doing?" I hissed, but he ignored me. He walked into the room, weaving between the dancing couples. Still, nobody reacted. He was maybe 10 feet inside when he turned back to me and gestured for me to follow. He was grinning, this wild, excited grin, like he'd just discovered something incredible. I shook my head. Everything in me was screaming danger, that this was wrong, that we needed to leave immediately. Ryan shrugged and turned to walk deeper into the church. He reached out to touch one of the dancing women, maybe to see if she was real. The moment his hand made contact with her arm, everything stopped. The music cut off mid-note. Every person in the church turned to look at him. 40-some faces, all turning in perfect unison, all with the exact same expression, blank, empty, like masks of human faces with nothing behind them. Then the woman Ryan had touched opened her mouth and screamed. It wasn't a human scream. It was this high-pitched mechanical shriek, like metal scraping against metal, and it went on and on without her taking a breath. The other people started screaming too, all in that same inhuman frequency, and they started moving toward Ryan. He stumbled backward, his face gone white, and ran for the door. I was already running, sprinting back toward our camp. Behind us I could hear Ryan's footsteps, and then other footsteps, lots of them, and those screaming voices getting closer. We reached the clearing, and Ryan was right behind me, gasping, the car, get to the car." We ran past our tent, leaving everything, and scrambled down the rough path toward where we'd parked the Civic. I kept looking back, and I could see them coming out of the church. Dozens of figures in old-fashioned clothing, moving wrong, too fast and too jerky, like stop-motion animation. We reached the car, and Ryan fumbled with his keys, his hands shaking so badly he dropped them. I could hear those things getting closer, crashing through the brush, and those awful screaming voices. Ryan finally got the door open, and we both threw ourselves inside. He jammed the key in the ignition. The car wouldn't start. He turned the key again. The engine turned over, but didn't catch. Again. Nothing. I looked in the side mirror and saw them emerging from the forest onto the road behind us. They were maybe 20 yards away. "Ryan, they're coming, they're right there!" I was screaming, my voice cracking. He turned the key again, pumping the gas, and finally the engine caught and roared to life. He threw it in reverse, not even looking, and hit the gas. We shot backward, and I felt a sickening thump as we hit something. Or someone. Ryan slammed on the brakes, threw it in drive, and we tore down that dirt road, the Civic fishtailing on the loose gravel. I looked back and saw them standing in the road, watching us leave. They didn't chase us anymore. They just stood there, dozens of silhouettes in old-fashioned clothing, lit by our taillights. Neither of us spoke for the entire 45 minutes it took to get back to the highway. When we had finally hit pavement, Ryan pulled over, and we both just sat there, shaking, breathing hard. The sky was starting to lighten with pre-dawn grey. "What the fuck was that?" Ryan finally said. His voice was hoarse. What the fuck did we just see? I didn't have an answer. I still don't. We decided to drive straight through, back to Austin. No camping, no exploring, just get as far away as possible. We stopped at the same gas station in Raton around 7 a.m. The same clerk was there, starting her shift, or maybe ending a night shift. When she saw us walk in, her expression changed. It was like she knew. "You went to Ashford," she said. Not a question. Ryan nodded. He looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. We both did. She didn't say anything else. She just shook her head slowly, like she was disappointed but not surprised. We got coffee and gas and left. Somewhere around Amarillo, Ryan broke the silence. "We should go back," he said. I stared at him. "Are you insane? We need to document it. We need proof. Nobody's going to believe us otherwise. I don't care if they believe us. I'm never going back there." We argued about it for the next hour. Ryan was convinced that we'd witnessed something incredible, something that needed to be recorded and studied. I thought we'd barely escaped something that wanted to hurt us, and we should count ourselves lucky and never speak of it. We didn't resolve the argument, we just stopped talking about it. When we got back to our apartment in Austin that Saturday afternoon, Ryan immediately went to his room and started researching. I tried to sleep but kept jolting awake with the sound of that mechanical screaming in my ears. When I finally gave up and went to the living room, Ryan was at his laptop, surrounded by printed articles and old books he must have had stored somewhere. "I found something," he said, barely looking up. "There was a fire in Ashford in 1952. It started in the church during some kind of town celebration. 47 people died, most of them burned beyond recognition. The town was abandoned after that. The mine had already closed a year earlier, and after the fire, everyone just left." "So those were ghosts?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't know what they were, but there's more. There've been disappearances. Nothing recent, but back in the 70s and 80s, at least 4 people vanished in that area. Hikers, explorers. They never found the bodies." A chill ran down my spine. "Ryan, we need to tell someone." "Tell them what?" "That we saw ghosts. That we got chased by dead people from the 1950s. They'll think we're on drugs." He had a point, but I still felt like we had a responsibility to warn people, to make sure nobody else went there. Over the next few days, Ryan became obsessed. He spent all his free time researching Ashford, reading about the fire, trying to find any information about paranormal activity in the area. He contacted the hosts of that podcast that had mentioned the town, but they never responded. He found forums where urban explorers shared locations, and he posted warnings about Ashford, but people either ignored him or made jokes. I tried to move on. I went back to work, fell back into my routine, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. I kept having this recurring nightmare where I was back in that church, and when I tried to leave, the doors were locked. I'd turn around, and all those blank faces would be surrounding me, and they'd open their mouths to scream, and I'd wake up gasping. 2 weeks after our trip, Ryan told me he was going back. "Absolutely not," I said. "You can't be serious. I need to understand what happened. I need proof. I'm going to bring better cameras, recording equipment. I'll go during the day, stay out of the buildings, just document everything from a safe distance." I tried everything I could think of to talk him out of it. I appealed to logic, to safety, to his family who'd be devastated if something happened to him. Nothing worked. Ryan had made up his mind. "Come with me," he said. "We'll be careful this time. We'll stay together, keep our distance. Just a few hours, in and out." I said no. I said no over and over again. I told him I'd call the police if he went, report him missing before he even left. We fought about it, the worst fight we'd ever had. He called me a coward. I called him suicidal. But in the end, he went anyway. It was a Tuesday morning in late October. I'd left for work while Ryan was still asleep, and when I got home that evening, there was a note on the kitchen counter. It just said, "I'll be back by tomorrow night. I'll prove to you that I'm not crazy." I called him immediately. It went straight to voicemail. I called 10 more times over the next hour, nothing. By Wednesday night I was panicking. I'd left probably 50 voicemails and twice as many texts, nothing. I called his mum, trying to sound casual, asking if she'd heard from him. She hadn't, and now she was worried too. Thursday morning, I called the police. The officer who took my report was polite, but clearly not too concerned. Ryan was an adult. It had only been 2 days. He'd left a note saying he'd be back. People take off for a few days all the time, but I insisted that he'd gone to this remote, dangerous place, and the officer said they'd look into it. Friday afternoon, 2 detectives showed up at my apartment. They asked me to walk them through everything, from the beginning. I told them about our first trip, about what we saw in the church, about Ryan's obsession with going back. I could see their expressions changing as I talked. That same look I've seen 100 times since. Doubt, suspicion. One of them actually asked me if Ryan and I had been using any substances, but they took it seriously enough to send someone to look. A couple of officers from New Mexico State Police drove out to Ashford that weekend. They found Ryan's car parked where we'd left ours the first time. The doors were unlocked, keys in the ignition. His camera bag was on the passenger seat, but no sign of Ryan. They searched the entire town, the surrounding forest, brought in dogs, even used drones. They found our abandoned campsite, tent still standing, all our gear still inside, but no Ryan. The investigation went on for weeks. They questioned me repeatedly, and I know I was a suspect for a while. How could I not be? I was the last person to see him. I'd argued with him. I hadn't gone with him or stopped him from going. They searched my apartment, my car, my work computer. They interviewed my co-workers, my family, ex-girlfriends. They looked at Ryan's finances, his phone records, his social media. They brought in the FBI. They never found anything. Ryan's mum came to Austin and stayed for a month, putting up flyers, organising search parties, doing press conferences begging for information. I went to a few of them, stood beside her while cameras flashed and reporters asked questions. I told them everything I knew, except the part about the ghosts, or whatever they were. That part I kept to myself, on the advice of the lawyer I'd had to hire. The searches eventually stopped. The case went cold. Ryan was officially listed as a missing person, presumed dead, though they never found a body. I moved out of our apartment a few months later. I couldn't stay there, couldn't walk past Ryan's empty room every day. I left Austin entirely, moved to Denver, got a new job, tried to start over, but I never really moved on. I think about Ryan every single day. I wonder what happened to him in those moments after he got out of his car at Ashford. Did he go into the church again? Did he see those things in the daylight? Did they look different, less human? Or did they look exactly like normal people until he got too close? Did it hurt? God, I hope it didn't hurt. Sometimes I torture myself with other scenarios. Maybe he's not dead. Maybe whatever those things were took him somewhere, and he's trapped there, in that church, or in some other version of Ashford that exists alongside our world. Maybe he's been trying to get back for years, and I'm here thinking he's gone while he's screaming for help, just on the other side of some invisible barrier. Or maybe he left on purpose. Maybe he got tired of me telling him he was crazy, tired of nobody believing him, and he faked the whole thing. Maybe he's living in some other city under a different name, occasionally checking to see if anyone's still looking for him. But I don't believe that. I know what we saw that night. I know the fear in Ryan's eyes when we were running. Whatever happened to him at Ashford, it wasn't voluntary. I've been to therapy. I've tried different medications for anxiety and insomnia. I've done EMDR for PTSD. Some things help a little for a while, but nothing makes it go away. Nothing stops the nightmares where I'm back in that clearing, hearing those mechanical screams. And this time, I turn around, and it's Ryan's face looking at me with those empty eyes. I did try to go back once, about a year after Ryan disappeared. I made it as far as Raton, to that same gas station. A different clerk was working, some teenage kid. I asked him if he knew how to get to Ashford. Ashford, he said, looking confused. Never heard of it. You sure it's around here? I showed him the location on my phone, the GPS coordinates I'd saved. He zoomed in on the map, and his frown deepened. I mean, there's nothing marked there, but yeah, there's old mining roads all through those mountains. Could be something up there. But why would you want to go? There's nothing out that way. I left without answering. I sat in my car in the gas station parking lot for 20 minutes, trying to make myself drive up into those mountains. But I couldn't do it. Just the thought of seeing those buildings again, of potentially running into those things, made me feel like I couldn't breathe. So I turned around and drove back to Denver. Ryan's case occasionally gets attention from true crime podcasters or online sleuths. I've been contacted dozens of times by people wanting to interview me, wanting to hear the full story, wanting to theorize about what really happened. Some think he was murdered by a local, that the abandoned town story is a cover. Some think he staged his own disappearance. Some have even suggested that I killed him, that everything I've said is an elaborate lie. A few people, the ones who've gone deep into researching the area, have mentioned strange stories about northern New Mexico. Disappearances, time slips, encounters with people or things that shouldn't exist. They ask me if Ryan ever mentioned any of that stuff in his research. I always say no, even though I know he found some of those stories. I don't want to feed the conspiracy theories. I don't want Ryan's disappearance to become some ghost story that people tell for entertainment. But late at night when I can't sleep, I do look at those forums and websites. I read about other people who've claimed to experience things in abandoned places, time anomalies, encounters with people from the past, buildings that change or appear and disappear. And I wonder if maybe Ryan found what he was looking for. Proof that something exists beyond what we can see and understand. I wonder if the cost of that knowledge was worth it to him. I still have Ryan's camera bag, the one the police found in his car. They gave it back to Ryan's mum eventually, and she gave it to me, said Ryan would have wanted me to have it. Inside was his DSLR camera, empty, no memory card, and that disposable Kodak camera he'd bought at the gas station, still full. I've never gotten it developed. I've carried it with me through 3 moves, and it's sitting in my desk drawer right now, next to his spare car key and the friendship bracelet his little sister made for him when she was 8. Maybe someday I'll take it to get developed. Maybe there are photos on there from that first trip, before everything went wrong. Maybe I'll see something in those photos that will help me understand what happened. Or maybe I'll just see us, Ryan and me, young and stupid, grinning in front of an abandoned church, unaware that we were about to stumble into something we had no business finding. But I don't think I'll ever develop that film. I don't think I want to see whatever might be on there. Some mysteries maybe are meant to stay mysterious. Some questions don't have answers that a human mind can process. It's been almost 6 years now. Ryan's mum calls me sometimes, usually around his birthday or around the anniversary of his disappearance. We don't talk about Ashford anymore, we just talk about Ryan, about our favourite memories of him, about how much we miss him. His case is still officially open, but nobody's actively investigating. It's just another cold case file in some database, another missing person statistic. Every year, thousands of people vanish in this country. Some are found, most aren't. Ryan's just one more name on an endless list. But to me, he'll never be just a statistic or a cold case. He was my best friend. He was the person who convinced me to take chances, to see the world as an adventure instead of something to fear. He was someone who looked at abandoned buildings and saw beauty and history instead of decay. And somewhere, in that abandoned mining town in the mountains of northern New Mexico, something happened to him. Something took him away from everyone who loved him, and whatever that something was, it's still there. I know this because about 2 months ago, I got a package in the mail. No return address, postmarked from Raton, New Mexico. Inside was a single photograph, not digital, but an actual printed photo, the kind that comes from a disposable camera. It was a picture of Ryan, standing inside the church in Ashford, his back to the camera. He was surrounded by those people in old-fashioned clothing, dozens of them, all facing him in a circle, and every single one of them had their mouths open, like they were mid-scream. But Ryan wasn't running. He wasn't trying to escape. He was just standing there, perfectly still, and even though I could only see the back of his head in the photo, something about his posture looked wrong. Too straight, too still. I've shown that photo to the detectives, to Ryan's family, to 3 different private investigators. I've had it analysed by people who specialise in photo authenticity. Everyone agrees it's real, not photoshopped or manipulated, but nobody can explain who took it or how it got to me 6 years after Ryan disappeared. And nobody can explain why, when you look very closely at the bottom corner of the photo, you can see the edge of someone's shoe, a Nike sneaker, the exact kind I was wearing that night in October of 2019. I've checked every photo I took on that trip. I've looked through my phone records, my social media, everything. I never took a picture inside that church. I never even went inside. So who took that photo? Who was wearing my shoes? And why did it show up now, after all these years? I don't have answers to those questions. I don't think I ever will. All I know is that whatever happened to Ryan, whatever took him, it knows where I am. It remembers me. And sometimes, late at night, I hear music. Faint, distant, like it's coming from very far away, or from somewhere that's not quite in this world. Big band music, trumpets and clarinets, the same song that was playing that night in the church. When I hear it, I check all the windows and doors. I make sure they're locked. and I sit in the dark with my heart pounding, waiting for the music to stop, knowing that if it ever gets loud enough, if it ever sounds like it's coming from inside my apartment instead of from some impossible distance, I'll have to make a choice. Run or stay, fight or surrender, join Ryan wherever he is, or spend the rest of my life wondering what happened to him. So far, the music has always faded before I've had to decide, but it's getting louder each time. And one of these nights, I don't think it's going to stop.